8,000 miles to TapTown. My name is Finbar, and this is Markus Reuter, the architect of frequencies. Markus is a man of many dimensions, the true epitome of a true evolutionary artist, a musician, composer, and collaborator, someone who mixes touch guitar with technology in order to create sonic landscapes and experiences. Markus is the true architect of frequency, someone who understands the intersection of design and improvisation in creating and delivering a sound that's organic and live. Markus also is a coach and an instrument designer. He designed the touch guitars U8 and U10, and he travels the world and has traveled the world with his multiple bands from Europa String Choir, Stickman, Crimson Project, not to mention the boundless amounts of content that he's actually produced from albums which are available online. So I caught up with Markus on this episode to talk everything touch guitars, music, inspiration, effects, touring, and basically life. We had a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Markus Reuter. Markus, awesome. So great to have you on the show, buddy. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, well, it's mate, going through looking at this whole incredible sort of body of work that you've done, you know, from being a composer, a musician, an educator, a guitar builder, you know, it's there's so much to unpack. So I'm really, really excited about getting the lowdown, so to speak.
And you know, there's much more than what people know.
Yeah, well, hopefully we're going to get into some of that. So what let's go back to the start. So you're in Germany. What age did you start getting into music? How did you find touch guitar? Like, where did all this start for you?
You know, I'm one of those guys who's not really talented with musical instruments, or let's just say physically talented. Like maybe I had an interest in music from the very beginning. I remember singing Hey Jude by the Beatles when I was 3 years old and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
My parents always kind of like made sure that I had a good musical education. And but I wasn't that interested until I was about 10 years old, and my uncle introduced me to music. He had vinyl and he played me music. That must have been like in 81 or something.
Yeah.
And he also liked instrumental music, and so eventually he played me Mike Oldfield, which I really, really, really enjoyed back then. And my mother and my uncle then took me to a concert, to Mike Oldfield concert in Germany, and that was sort of like the beginning. Really, like I remember that I had goosebumps when the show started, you know, that kind of thing. And somehow, like Oldfield as like a composer and performer and producer sort of became my role model somehow. But really, there was like a 10-year lag, I think, until I started seriously working. So between age 10 and 20, I was just kind of like picking up instruments and fiddling around with them, but I never practiced. I never really understood the value of practicing. And it was a guitar craft course with Robert Fripp that I went to in 91 when I was still 18. that sort of like changed my perspective, and I started to understand that there is, that there are tools that you can apply to become better at something. And, I was in a really pretty, and I talked about that with people recently a lot. I was in a pretty fancy school, but I was in the kind of group of people that was kind of like the scum group, where we had the bad teachers and stuff.
Mm.
So even at school, I never did my homework and stuff like that. It was kind of crazy. Uh, yeah, but
Maybe
anyway,
that's the
so it was
secret to success right there.
it probably is somehow.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was so bored in school. It's completely erased from my memory. Right?
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
incredible.
I
But
was the
anyway,
same. I went to a Christian
yeah.
school, and it was really. I used to get the strap. That's how long ago it was. Showing my age now, but
Oh my god. Oh my
I
god.
think it built some strength in me. But you know what's funny? As you were talking, I remember being a kid and listening to Tubular Bells, and I still
Yeah.
remember when he said electric guitar. You know when he said the things?
Yeah.
That blew my mind. I was like, because I'm in this music world, and then he would just say these one words, and I still remember electric guitar, and it blew me away.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was
So how did that then evolve from there? Where did it go from there, bud?
yeah. So the guitar craft with Robert Fripp was very important, and I had one personal meeting with him in that first course. I was still 18, and I had heard. The reason why I ended up going to a course was that I had just a few months before that I had discovered Discipline, the album, and obviously it's Tony Levin playing stick on that. And anyway, so I had this personal meeting with Robert, and I asked him about the stick, and Robert was very positive about it. He said, like, if he were younger, he would love to learn it. And somehow I was so interested in it, and like the guitar, for some reason, the guitar was always a little bit of a struggle for me. Not a struggle, but like this idea that you can just like use all 8 fingers on the fretboard rather than have a picking hand and fretting hand appeal to me a lot. And I know that it does to a lot of people, because I remember like my dreams before I got my first Chapman stick, which were like, okay, like there's like this grid, and you can kind of like mentally kind of create this already this musical future somehow where you can imagine things. But then once I got the instrument, it was like a slap in the face, like because the dreams didn't translate into
Yeah, it's
reality.
like, how come I can't instantly play it like in my dreams?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it was very good for me because it was the one I have to say the one time in my life where I had to make a decision to really go with something. Like, okay, so I said, okay, like I know if I'm not going to take this serious, I'm not going to get anywhere.
Hmm.
So I might as well take it seriously, and I went 100%. So that's kind of like how that went. And obviously it was a little bit of Tony Levin on Peter Gabriel. So even though some of that turned out to be bass, actually what I was thinking was stick
Hmm.
anyway. But
Hmm.
um, I remember that back then it was like VHS times, right? And somebody made me a compilation of King Crimson TV appearances and live shows and stuff, and that's how I actually saw Tony play.
Wow.
And yeah,
It's amazing too because I grew up in a little town in Australia, and you're in Germany, and it's like I'm sure there wasn't many resources to learn. Like, who do you go to learn a stick, right? Like, it's like you
yeah,
are
no,
watching the VHSs and you're sort of working it out as you go. But I think there's some
yeah,
magic in that too, of sometimes not knowing, because you actually find your own path.
yeah, exactly. And that's how it happened for me, really. And I was lucky that I got the instrument in January, I think, and in June there was back then it was still called Stick Seminar in Belgium by Daniel Schell,
Yep.
and
Oh,
there
was that
was
going back
Frank.
then? Was it?
Yeah, it was, and
Right.
it was great. Frank Jolliffe was there,
Yeah.
and Jim Lampy. And Jim Lampy being the greatest stick player of all times. Like
Mhm.
I got my first real instruction from him, Frank and Daniel, and
Wow.
it was fantastic. But at the same time, and I don't know, like I didn't know back then but I was sort of clever, and I realized because I saw in people that they hit a ceiling very quickly with the instrument. And the ceiling, I then start to analyze kind of what's happening here. So why don't people go further? right? And that was then the trigger to developing my own technique. And that was the beginning. And in '96, I think it was '96, I bought the war guitar, 8-string war guitar, and that was a
Did you get that from
revelation.
Trey? You bought that from Trey, or?
No, I bought the stick from Trey,
Right.
actually. The first stick I got from Trey, and then Trey had, for very briefly, he played an 8-string war guitar, which Mark Ward continued to build. And actually, like he had a black one, which was sort of like a prototype, and then he had a Purdue one. And actually, I had placed my order at the same. So it's like his first real instrument and my first. They are sister instruments, and they are very good instruments. It was the TSG-8. Like, so for anybody who wants to buy a wah guitar, get a TSG-8. No, that's just my opinion. But anyway, it was a revelation because like I've never seen myself as sort of like the guy who wants to play, even though I can and I do, but I didn't want to play two parts at the same time. I saw myself as a team player, ensemble player. And I got lucky in '96. I also joined a band called Europa String Choir, which was like my favorite music at the time, and I was so impressed with the music. I basically just called them and said, I need to join this band. I bought a ticket to fly to the UK. I flew there, and because there was they didn't ask me to come, so I didn't know what they would want me to do with it.
It's a reverse audition, right?
Exactly. And so I learned all the parts. I knew both guitar parts and the viola parts. So just in case I could just, double anything they wanted me to double. And yeah, they liked me, and we became a quartet then. So that kind of like was together with at the same time as I got the 8-string guitar. So it was a perfect field to experiment with that instrument in an actual group, right? So yeah, so that was sort of like, that's the first like 4 years maybe of being a touch player. And like I have this I don't know even how to call it, but it's called the Touch Guitar Circle, and it's just a group of people that want to work with whatever I have discovered, and we're also like collecting all the discovery everybody else makes in the group, and we turn that into sort of like not a formal system, but like you have like go-to exercises for any challenge you may have. And that started for me. That started, I think, in around '95 when I was still playing the Chapman stick, and I said, okay, like I need something like the mother of all exercises, right? So that was my idea. And then I realized, okay, there's like these two principles that sort of are obvious that like we come to when we play an instrument like that, which is okay, like the standard like 4 fingers for 4 frets, right? And then repeating a note by using, well, is my hand actually in the image? I can see. Okay, so using 4 fingers to play one note. Right, so it's these two principles. And then I just put that together, and it became this exercise, which is known as the mother exercise. And it's that was kind of like the beginning, like the real formal beginning of what is now the Touch Guitar Circle, and what I call the family of exercise. So it's not something shady. It's just because I had the idea from the mother of all exercises, right? That was the initial idea. So, and then like, because having a family like with the mother, then it was obvious. Okay, like let's see. Okay, maybe these other exercises that I found, they have some sort of like relationship, like in a family, right? So that's why there's the son, the daughter, mother, father, grandmother and grandfather as like the big 6 exercises. And it's just, I mean, it wasn't planned as that, but it has a certain power to pull people in and really want to learn this. And once you kind of like understand these basic exercises, with the daughter being the main and the most important one actually, then you can go anywhere. And that was my aim. I didn't want to tell people what to play. It was more about like, how can I play whatever I want to play.
Yeah, that's what I love by watching some of your stuff. It just seems like there's a lot of live improvisation going on, and
Yeah.
you know, and with the way you're using your effects, and I don't know whether it's looping or whatever. It's just this very soundscape driven stuff, and it just allows an enveloping of things to intercollide with each other, and then seems like things are just evolving out of improvisation. But it's sort of like sound architecture in a way, whereby things are being built without knowing, which
Exactly.
is true improvisation, right? And you know, like obviously the structure stuff. I listen to you know, like Truce and some of your Stickman stuff, and there's some stuff there but there still seems to be this beautiful Mike Oldfield-esque, you know, like soundscape stuff that's going on behind it. So it's really it's great. And also, what I love about talking to artists, creative artists like yourself and like the other people I'm talking to, is that everyone's got a different perspective on it, but it's the nuance of the strings and what you can do with the sounds and how that can evolve. It's what I love about it is that there is no right way or wrong way, but there is. Well, there's some guiding principles, but it's like once you can go off into your own direction, it's just so inspiring. And I think a lot of that inspiration is being. I'm talking for myself now. You know, I'm old, jaded. I've been playing music most of my life and composing most of my life, but the touch guitar or tap guitar, whatever you want to call it, has really inspired my love for music again. I got really burnt out.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh yeah, I've done that. I've composed this. I've done that. And it's just like, it became more of a job, but now I feel like I'm reconnected with music through this instrument. So it's really, and then listening to what you're doing and stuff, it's just so creative and so inspiring.
Yeah, you know, I think that people underestimate the power of this technique, let's say, because it is really the most immediate stringed instrument you can think of, right? Like with other stringed instrument, where the basic mode is to excite the string with one hand, let's say, or some other way,
Yeah.
like with bow or whatever, and to fret. Like here, you get the immediate response of the vibration in the finger. Like if you
Mm.
really pay attention, you tap one note and you hold that note, and you can feel the vibration in the fingertip. Right? You can feel it on your thumb also,
Mm.
but in the fingertip, right?
Yeah.
And even when the instrument isn't amplified, and it's such a beautiful thing, because like, and you know, like the Pythagoras, like subdividing the string. Basically, you have the basic physics of sound right there in front of you. You have that
Mm.
one string, subdivide it with your finger. You feel the result of what you're doing right away.
Mm.
So it's kind of like it's a feedback loop within itself that is
100%.
like teaching you what sound is about, and that's the amazing beauty of it. And this is the and this insight is also what I then brought together in my teachings, where like the idea is like to unify the hands before you take them apart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like
Yep.
where like the original image we have of playing the stick, for example, is that you can do like two hands like playing two different things, which is great, but I think in order to kind of like develop a real sense and real closeness, real relationship with the instrument, it's awesome if two hands kind of like work as a unit and
Yep.
kind of literally embrace the instrument, and you're sort of like making love to the instrument with your both
Yeah,
hands.
sure.
It's not just two guys fumbling
Yep.
about, right? It's like, and 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 you really get the sense like if you have a simple system to assign fingers to pitches, you will kind of like even in your brain, let's say, create a map that corresponds with the physical ratios that you hear,
Mm.
and that is incredibly fascinating, and you don't really get that the same way with other instruments,
Yeah.
especially where it creates the both hands.
Yeah.
And
One thing that blew me away, I've been playing like 8 finger on a guitar for a long time, that sort of tapping stuff on guitars. But what blew me
yeah,
away, especially when I got my wall guitar, specifically the wall guitar,
yeah,
was the sustain in this thing. So I just hit like my right hand, just a light tap, and on a guitar it just seems to die. And my guitars are set up like all plecked and all set up properly, set up super low. But maybe it's the string length or the way the body resonates with it. It just this thing just you hit a note and it's there and it feels like, as you were saying, you feel part of the sound resonance. This thing's all, it's not just the strings, the whole thing seems to be resonating, and it's like it's quite an experience actually.
exactly. And so that's why the aim really is to put as little energy into the string as possible, because the finer the energy is, your like the initial impulse is, the stronger and the longer the vibration will be.
Mm,
Because anything that is above that sweet spot, let's say, makes the sound collapse.
mm,
And it's sort of, and that's why like the war guitar in particular sounds a little bit like it's pre-compressed, right? Like
mhm,
you get that sustain as if you are running through a compressor, right? Even just from the instrument.
mm.
And it's a wonderful thing. And like I said, I think it really is that there's a certain beauty to experiencing the physicality of making that sound with one finger. Like you could say, okay, I'll do that on a piano as well, but it's not the same, right? You have the
100%.
key,
Yeah.
you have the hammer, you have everything in between, so it's not the same, right?
Mm,
And this is I think like a major thing. On the keyboard, you don't need to leave the finger on the key, really. I mean,
yeah. I know.
you
I
do
know what you mean.
on
Yeah.
the key to make it sustain, but on the touch instrument, you have no other option. You just have to leave the finger down for as long as you want the note to ring, right?
Yeah.
So, and then if you just take your finger off, right, on the keyboard, the note stops.
Mm,
But on the touch instrument, that's a little bit difficult.
mm,
It's different and a little bit difficult, because
mm.
just taking the finger off the string can give you the sound of open strings, like even though it's muted, but you get a little bit of pop and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So my technique is actually like the basic idea of the technique that I'm teaching is I call it touch, release, move. So you touch, you release. Release means you're still on the string, but you're just touching the surface, but you're not pushing it down anymore. And then you move away, right? So
Right.
it's touch, release, move. So energy in, energy out, and move somewhere else. And that's sort of like a real revelation once you're on. And it's just like for most people, it's just this little switch. I think, oh, I never thought about that. Well, you actually leave the finger on the string after you end the note, after the note ends, or as the note ends.
Mm.
And for like I said, for some people, it's just a switch, and they
Well,
play
it
so
just
much
makes
better
all the
when.
difference too. Like, I know if I'm playing a funk thing, some of the dead notes and the way you play the dead notes, I think on touch guitar, the dynamics play such an important part into the sound that you're creating. Whereas on a normal
Yeah.
guitar, it's not, obviously the dynamics are important in terms of where you're phrasing or how you're holding the pick, but it's not as intrinsic to the sound, I don't think, at least
Because it's
from my
not
perspective.
it's not tied to the fretting finger. That's why it's like
Yeah.
on the guitar, you would bring the dynamics in from the other hand, just
Correct. Yeah.
taking care of that. The fretting hand is like, that's why I would not on a touch guitar, I would never talk about the fretting hand. It's not it is not fretting. It has to also generate the impulse to make the sound, the note ring, right? And
Mm.
like going back to like my first course there in '93, I asked a few people like, can you explain to me how you play dynamically on this thing? And believe it or not, most of the people said, and this was also something I was reading back then, you can't play dynamically with this. I said, come on, bullshit, right? And
Totally.
but it's just people haven't thought about it. But then it's kind of like, it's obvious if you start thinking about it, you try it out. It's the velocity of the finger, right? So it's not how hard you hit the string. That is like, some people talked about that, like it's how hard you hit the string. But it's not the same as saying it's the velocity of the finger. Like
No.
the faster I can make the finger move, right, and then hit the string, and the string hits the fret,
Mm.
that gives me volume, right?
Mm.
So you can simply try that. If you bring the finger down very, very slowly and push the string down, you don't hear anything, right? But the faster the finger comes down, the louder the note. So that's why also I was thinking, okay, so the main focus should be to train the fingers, to teach the fingers, and to train the fingers to develop that speed in a really small space, because that's kind of like what we're dealing with there, right?
Yeah.
Like it's maybe just a couple, like three millimeters, maybe, right? And within that small space, you need to develop a way to play soft notes and loud notes. And here something else you said, or I said. So, like, obviously, there's no right or wrong. I completely agree with that. But if we're talking about, again, about physics of producing a note, we know that we need to be able to start a note, and we need to be able to end a note. And I think, like, really the secret, if there's such a thing as the secret, is to embrace everything.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and this is like, I was super lucky, because like the first I went to study psychology at university, and I was lucky that there was a free improvising orchestra at the university. So it was
Right.
the year that I got the stick. So yeah, I was at home, I was trying to practice, like, how can I, like, just get proper notes, like, or like 3 consecutive chromatic notes, right? But then with the free improvising orchestra, I was doing like I was going crazy, right? And I think it's that way. It's like, you always want to embrace the totality
Yeah.
of the world, right? And it's
Yeah.
both that you can kind of study something, and it's also that you can be totally like anarchistic, right? Right, in a way, and like, and
This is great. I
all,
love
all
it.
it all belongs together. It's all part of the same thing. And I wouldn't even talk about two sides of a coin. That's also bullshit. No, it's
Yeah.
like everything's connected. It's not on two sides, right?
Yeah.
And so I was lucky that I was always interested in all sorts of music and the sound design, right? Like, even though, like, maybe like the first 10 or even 20 years of my career, I didn't really have access to professional tools, but I always kind of like had this idea to get the best out of whatever I had
Yeah.
available.
So,
You
buddy,
know,
like, take me into when did you first get things like the Helix and you start playing around with that? When did that really? Because that seems to be a big part of your sound these days, right? I don't know if I'm correct or not, but when did you first get into the sound design using these tools for your touch instrument?
So basically, the answer is interesting because I had a Boss GT5 in '94 or '95, and it was sort of like the precursor to what we have now. And back then, when I was working with the GT5, I was thinking, okay, it would be great to also have this and that and blah blah blah. Basically, dreaming up the Helix or similar devices
Yeah, yeah,
back then.
yeah.
So yeah, for me, I remember I used because Trey was using it. I used the Art SGX blah 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 thing.
Hmm.
That was the first multi-effects processor I had. Then it was I was using like very simple stuff like a Digitech delay and a Rat distortion pedal, and then from a quarter verb 2, which is an amazing Elysis. It's an
Okay.
amazing thing.
Yeah, I remember those.
So that was kind of like the beginning, and then I had the GD5 and Oberheim Echoplex looping delay. So that was sort of like the beginning of everything, and I used that stuff way into the early 2000s. Like the first sort of like international successes I had were with Ian Body and an album called Distant Rituals, which was released in '99,
Yeah.
and that's all GT5, believe it or not, GT5 with the Echoplex, and I had two Echoplexes back then.
All right.
We can talk about that later, but so really I was always sort of like trying to be on the cutting edge of what's available. So I remember I played an opening show for Richard Barbieri, and I actually remember the date. I think it was 1st of March 2005,
Okay.
and I was using my laptop. I was using
Right.
Ableton on my laptop in
Yeah.
2005. And as you can imagine, back then it wasn't really that, it wasn't
Yeah.
that stable. And,
Yeah.
and
Sure.
obviously it crashed during the show and stuff like that. But anyway, so I was always like looking for this portable, that was kind of like, because I remember like with the two Echoplex and stuff, I was carrying the big case around, and I was traveling all over the world back then already. And so the idea was always like, how can I make this as small as possible? And then obviously, so I concentrated on getting the laptop set up right, and on getting sort of like the basic sound canvas coming from a floor device. That
Right.
has always been my idea. Okay, I want the basic sounds to be independent of the laptop, but the laptop is the looper, right?
Yeah.
Like just a fancy looper. And it was in around 2008, I think, where that all that came together. And I'm just trying to think. I don't even remember at that time. Like after the GT5, it was GT6, GT8. I never went to the 10.
Right.
So and then it went to the Pod HD
Right.
500, I think that, and I used that one even when I was touring in your area down there
Okay.
with the Crimson Project. I had the Pod HD 500, and that was already kind of like a very impressive thing for me. Like and this is another important topic, I think, with like just like people confuse the touch instrument with the guitar or with a piano or with a bass
Yeah.
sometimes. There's also like if you're looking at which great guitar tones do we have in the world, and you try to recreate those sounds with the touch instrument, it's very hard
Mm.
because it's simply not the same.
Sure.
As you say, the string tension is very different, like um, the
Yeah.
length
Yeah.
of the
Yeah. I
string.
get it. Yeah. The scale length's different. String tension's different. Yeah.
Yes, and it's the attack is different, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So it's really hard to kind of like go by what sounds great or what sounds good, as because like mostly when we use these terms, we refer to something we already know, we've
Mm.
heard before, right? So that's why with the touch instrument, we need to kind of like develop our own vision a little bit. We need to have an idea, kind of like where do we want to go, and maybe some people get good at recreating classic guitar tones, which is nice, but for me, I was never interested in that. So I
Mm.
was more into kind of like really, really super dirty, super high gain stuff that almost, and I have to say, it's like almost really removes the character of the instrument from the actual sound that you're
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
Uh, but I found that fascinating because with the touch instrument, there's always, because it's that subtlety of the touch, every little shiver of the finger translates into the sound,
Mm,
right? So there's always this connection with what you're hearing, which you really don't get with any other instrument,
mm.
uh, as far as I'm concerned. Like it's really so powerful to have this direct connection with the note,
But when did you, Marcus? When did you go? When was the time? I don't know if you can take us back there, but when was the time when you were sitting down or standing up or playing somewhere and you went, I have to build my own guitar.
Yeah, yeah,
How did
I
that
can
come
tell you.
about?
I can tell you exactly. So I think the idea was in my head ever since the late 90s, I think, right? So, but it was actually the formal the naming of the Touch Guitar Circle kind of like was founded in 2005, and so that's when I introduced the name for my teaching. Um, and in 2006, I had a meeting with Robert Fripp, like as my former teacher, right,
Yeah.
in Portugal at a festival, and we had a coffee together, and it was really nice because like Robert, we have this like really we don't talk much at all, but whenever there's an interaction, it's been very good for me. I don't know how it's been for him, but for me it was also very
It's got
good.
this like
So
mental thing going on. Jedi mind
yeah,
trick.
no, he was. It was great. I don't think he intended this at all, but we had this meeting. We had a coffee, like I said, in Portugal, and he asked me, Marcus, you're one of the few people who has become a lifer. You make music, and you earn a living from it. How do you do it? And I explained to him how I do it, and as I was talking, like because like I have that extra voice, right? Like as you talk,
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
else is talking that, right? And during that conversation, I realized, okay, like all everything I do is sort of like has idealistic value, but nothing more than that, right? It's not objects, like even like a CD has an object, but it's about the music, right? But
Yeah.
but so I realized, okay, like but what and at that point I realized, okay, like what kind of knowledge do I have that I can actually turn into a physical object, right? And at that point the technique was sufficiently developed so that I could say, okay, like what happens if I just build an instrument for what I've learned about the instrument, about the technique, let's say, right? So because like this one um, problem I've always had, like, or like that it turned out to be like the problem with the Chapman stick for me was that it kind of remained in the stage of what I would call an invention, right? And which is great. I mean, I give all the credit to Emmett for that. It's amazing, and I fell in love with his invention, like no doubt about that. But then, kind of like, what happens if we go beyond? And so I had no like my heart was not in showing how great a guitar builder I am or how great my ideas are, whatever. I just wanted to build that tool that works for what I had discovered about the technique.
Mm,
And so I was lucky that my friend Pat Mastelotto, who I had already started to work with in 2005. So in 2006, I learned that his next door neighbor, is actually a great luthier who was sort of like working. He's not like a frontline guy, but he kind of designs instrument for Collings and for PRS, and
okay.
he's a really great guy, really really amazing luthier. And so I went to him and I brought my war guitar and my stick and I showed both to him and I said, Ed, I want to build a real traditional guitar instrument. And I said guitar, I didn't say bass, right? This also
Sure.
makes a difference. And I said like a real traditional guitar instrument that is kind of like tailored to the technique that I use. And it was amazing. Like it didn't take long to build the prototype, which is I already back then I had the idea to call it the U8, and the idea for the U was kind of like the universal.
Right.
I don't know, and so the prototype I played the prototype for like 6 months, and I never touched any other instrument since. Like, and it's also that's how it happens for everybody who kind of gets one of these instruments, is that it really actually makes you play. It's it's like where the hurdle with the Chapman stick is pretty high
Mm,
to really start making music with it beyond just the doing this, right? If you
yeah.
know what I mean.
I know it. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the U8, it was just such a revelation. Okay, it's easy to play. It's like super compact, and it feels more like you could say it feels more like a guitar than a bass. That's also like the main difference between the war guitar really and my designs. And this may be interesting to you. Like when I had the prototype, I actually tried to call Mark War, and he didn't answer. But I wrote him a message then saying, Mark, because we had been friends since
Sure.
'96, like
Yeah.
right. So and I said, Mark, I've developed this design, and would you be interested in building it? Because I had no intention to actually start a company for that.
Yeah.
It
Right.
was never, yeah, right. But that was around the time where he was already ill because
Right.
and so I didn't know that back then. But so that's why he never responded to me. And then sort of like the way it went was that I went to add the builder in Texas, and I spent 4 months there with him. And because I wanted to learn, um, how to build these instruments.
Right.
And so the first series of 10 instruments I actually helped build, uh,
Wow.
and helped building, and then I took those 10 instruments to Europe, and Ed said at that point, he said, Marcus, you take this. I don't want anything to do with this anymore. You take it, you turn it into a success. Right?
Okay.
It was amazing. Like
Yeah.
he was
Right.
he was really he is the Jedi guy, actually,
Yeah. Right.
not Robert Smith. Ed Reynolds, amazing. Yeah.
So,
And then
so just on that, and I don't know whether it was just my eyes, but it seems like the fingerboard is very glassy, like my Parker. Is it? It doesn't look like normal fingerboard. It looks like it's got a very like a glass. Am I correct in saying that, or is it sort of?
yeah, it's just it's not. It's just that particular instrument. It's the AU8, which is a semi-acoustic instrument with piezos and stuff. So it's super highly resonant and really like another step up from the U8. We can talk about that later. But yeah, it's plumwood.
Right.
Plumwood really attracts dirt,
Right.
and so that's why it's lacquered. It's just a lacquered fretboard.
Okay. All right. Well, it
Plumwood.
well, it got my
It's
eyes going anyway. I thought you've done some massive sort of like crazy invention there. I think there's
it's
also something beautiful about what you said about being a you're happy playing with other people or being part of the sound, and
well,
there's something really amazing about two people or three people or four people as they come together playing their one bit, that it's never the same, or it envelopes each other, and that is the creation of something new by the intersection of it. And it's you can be amazing by yourself, and that's great, but it's also sometimes it's that magic where the accidents happen, where you're doing something and someone else does something, and then it turns into something, and then that feeds you, and it just keeps going. And in a way, it's like it's like the string resonating and then feeding back. You're creating this feedback loop of energy and sound, and that feeds off it. So when you get into that flow, it's just unbelievable.
exactly. And I have always been happy with meeting the right musical partners. Like the first really important one being Bernhard Wüstheimer, who is kind of like I was the classically trained musician, and he has no idea whatsoever about any theory or level. Like he just pushes keys and listens, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and it was so liberating. Like, and I always expose myself to situations like that where it's like uh, opposing forces, let's say, like because that's when I feel I can learn the most, because it's like it's like like doing I do everything without a safety net, like in a way,
Hmm.
and that has been like, for some reason it led me or put me on this path where I was lucky to get to play with Tony Levin, right? Like this is like I've never had thought of that. Like I remember that was like a really funny incident in 2008 when King Crimson was on the 40th anniversary tour, and I was in the US, and I went to a show in Philly and to like 3 or 4 shows in New York City, and I had this my room was in the same hotel as the band, and I remember walking back from the gig, and Tony was in front of me, and he noticed me, and he felt like I was stalking him, and that was before I knew him. Right? It was like this really interesting moment. And only 2 years later, we were together in the rehearsal room writing
So you weren't in the
pieces.
rehearsal room because you threatened him because you were stalking him, were you?
No, it was interesting because Pat wanted me in Stickman from the very beginning, but Tony had already committed to Michael Bernier.
Right.
And so Michael did like the first 2 years or something of
Right.
the Stickman, and then I joined. In 2010 or 11, when we had the first shows together, I was already 38, right? So I
Right.
was already pretty late to play rock shows for the first time, right? So, but anyway,
Did you have
but anyway,
spandex on and having girls
yeah,
throwing underpants and stuff?
it was my very first show with them it was in the north of Argentina,
Right.
and it was 900 people. Like, it was the biggest show of the whole tour, was that first show. And so, like, my thinking before this was really like, how can I how can I as a person, um will I be able to stand the power coming from those guys, right? Like because they are so, and like it was amazing. Like, even like that first show, I knew this is going to work, this is going to be amazing, because there was this push and pull between us.
Right.
Like yeah. And I think, like, coming back to like what we're talking about, like the what you play and how you play and stuff. With Crimson music, it's a lot about how you play it.
Yeah.
Like anybody can learn the parts and play them, really.
Yeah.
But then how do you make it sound like Crimson?
Mm.
And that is difficult. And that's what what I learned from Pat and Tony. This way of kind of like holding back in this really not comfortable way, right? And I remember that very first show. It was like it was amazing. Like a like a avalanche kind of
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
and I thought, like, well, I didn't do like super well that first show, I think, but it was okay, it was good, and I knew, okay, this is going to be fine. And for the first 3 years of playing together, my mindset was, okay, I want to be the best sideman I can be for them to shine. I wanted them to be really confident in myself, so that they could do what they do best.
Yeah.
And then from there, it became a real trio where everyone was equal, sort of like.
Yeah.
Also, I think, in the view of the audience, because that was kind of like funny in the very beginning. Like, nobody was looking at Pat or at me even. Like, everybody's looking at Tony. Tony's the superstar, right? And it was funny to see all the heads turned this way.
Well, mate, they did it for a reason. So that's. But
Exactly. It was absolutely fine. But it was, also, I have to give credit to Robert Fraser, who is the sound engineer of Stigman, who he gave me you know, a lot of learning opportunities to be a traveling musician, because, like, there's a certain etiquette, right? And yeah, it's been great. And I'm actually pretty sad that, like, we had a 9-year run of playing amazing shows, amazing tours every year, right? And then suddenly, like, we were in Japan in
it'll be
in
back.
March.
You'll be back, bigger and better than ever, as they say.
Yes. But anyway, it was really good. And as far as like playing, and this is sort of like what I believe needs to happen with the touch instrument. We need to see more people play real shows,
Mm.
right? I think that is my aim also. Like, when I teach people, And that's why I want younger people to come to me, right? Like, come on, just pay a couple $100, get your 2 lessons and have a good starting point. You're like, don't sit on, trying to discover all this for yourself. It really is just holding you back. Because for me, looking back, I think like it took me 10 years, 20 years, like now almost 30 years of coming to this point where I think like people could be there in a year. Like I started this, I'm not sure if you've seen that, but I started this
Yeah, I did see
experiment
that.
with
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
powder.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. Like it's
yeah,
proof of concept, right? Like
yeah.
if you're an intelligent young man who wants to learn this instrument, it's going to take you like a year to be really
Well,
good.
I'm a year and a half in now, and I'm transcribing my own things. I'm playing them all. I'm comfortable. I've spent a lot of years playing music, but I've
Yeah.
had some good teachers. But yeah, you're right. Like it's even I think even if you're a beginner, like it's just having some guidance. It's not as scary. I actually think it's probably harder for someone who's good on one instrument because their mind is fighting this whole new way of doing something in a way. So I think
Yeah,
as a beginner, it's probably even easier.
it is. And I've always seen that people who were playing bass before, let's say, like left hand is a disaster. Like right hand is working perfectly, left
Mm,
hand is a disaster, and
mm,
stuff like that. Yeah, no, people who are coming from nothing can learn much quicker.
mm.
Yeah, and that's yeah.
So, mate, you've got a new album out. Like I was going through your Bandcamp. Like I think over my last 25 years of writing music, I've done worked on 3 or 4 albums. You've got like about 50 or something, which is pretty amazing.
I guess
No, 38 or
yeah,
something on there.
more. There's much more.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like
whatever. It's a pretty amazing body of work. Your new work, is that Anchor and Burden? Is that the new work?
yeah. That's the well. That's not the new work, but that's what's just been released.
Right. Okay. All right.
No, Anchor and Burden is sort of like the. I mean, like it's a pretty serious thing in a way because like that's why I also chose the name. Music for me has been like always an anchor, right? But now with the lack of like with the disruption of the world, it's sort of become also a burden because I'm starting to see like if you can't just do the hustle anymore, let's say, like if even the hustle doesn't work anymore,
Hmm.
then you probably you can start questioning like why do I do this, right? And I know this happens to a lot of musicians that it's kind of like an up and down with like okay, how do I feel about myself doing this? And so I wanted to sort of, create the situation for myself earlier this year where I said, okay, like I'm going to invite like 3 of my favorite musicians into the studio, and we're just going to improvise together for 2 days. And in the environment of that, like I recorded this 45 minutes of solo music, which is the Anchor and Burden album, Markus Reuter,
Yep.
Anchor and Burden, and
Yep.
then Anchor and Burden is also that band that recorded, during those 2 days, and we recorded 5 albums worth of stuff in two
Wow.
days, and
Wow.
and we're gonna and all of that is gonna get put out as well, and I'm gonna give you a video of the band as well too.
Right.
So it's gonna be that was sort of like and I invested quite a bit of money into this because everything also was filmed and stuff, and but that was sort of like my initiative to fight against the depression and to say, okay,
Great.
like if I'll just invest, we go into to the studio and we do this, and
Well,
yeah,
Marcus,
that's
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 like I got to say, that's just I absolutely love that attitude. It's just you believe in yourself, you back yourself. It's not poor old me, the world's bad. You just know I'm going to do this. I'm going to back myself. Going in, creating content. You're just a machine. You've got your business, your teaching, your composing, your music.
yeah.
Mate, it's a real honor to have you on the show. It's great to talk to you. I'm just thrilled with everything you're doing. I'm going to put some links. Obviously, we've cut to some videos here, but I'm going to put some links of your Bandcamp, your website, maybe the Guitar Circle, anything else that you want. Is there anything that you want to sort of promote or tell everyone about what you're working on or what you want to sort of how you want people to connect with you in any way?
Well, I suggest that people sign up for my mailing list. And really, I'm going to offer more group classes next year. And I encourage everyone who wants to learn more about music or about being an artist, or even if you want to learn something very specific about music, like people can always ask me, and I'm really I have to say I'm a great teacher. That's kind of like, maybe I'm the greatest. I'm not the greatest musician, but I'm a great teacher. So
Well, I think people would doubt that
people,
you. I think people think you're a great musician. There's no doubt about that. So
I, I
that's
I
just you
know,
being
but
humble.
from my perspective, I think like my forte is really getting other people involved in it, and that's sort of like the side of myself that I want to embrace, and people should know that they should never be afraid to contact me.
Great.
Like
Well, mate,
that.
you're a credit to the industry. You're a credit to music and being an entrepreneur, and you're building. And I wish you all the greatest of success. And I really thank you for coming on the show. And look forward to, once COVID's over, somewhere connecting with you somewhere in the world.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Thanks
buddy.
very
Well,
much.
thanks again, buddy.
Yeah.
Have a great night. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.